Hello, wherever you are. Hope your day is going well. I want to spend just a few minutes to talk about the immediate future in the United States. And so I'll call this Unfogging the Future. Now, let me say straight up that my beliefs, my preferences as far as what needs to happen in American politics, that isn't going to happen this year. And it may not happen for quite a long time. My side lost in the Democratic primary, and I don't think there is a lot of hope that the things I believe need to happen are actually going to happen. So this message isn't about what I want to happen or what I'm supporting to happen. I just want to try to look into the future a little bit and take a good guess at what may happen, because everybody wants to know what the future is going to be like, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to know the future? You could make all kinds of plans today to change what may happen in the future. And I think at the national level, with national politics, a lot of us are pretty much, like I said before, screwed, glued, and tattooed. The things that we believe in, the things that we want to happen, just simply aren't going to happen. So what is going to happen in 2016 and beyond? Well, a lot of people seem to believe that the next president of the United States will be Hillary Clinton. And this is what you get if you read the pundits in the newspapers every day, or online bloggers and so forth. The general consensus among the so-called wise heads, people who claim to know, is that of course Hillary's going to be elected. Of course she's going to be the next president. Who else could it be? Because after all, Hillary's supposedly knowledgeable about affairs of state. Well, she's knowledgeable about affairs of state if you hold to a certain point of view. What people don't realize is that the day-to-day experience of most people is very different from the day-to-day experiences of the pundits and the so-called wise heads and the people that you see on cable news and read out and online periodicals and newspapers and such. The experiences of those people simply don't jive with the experiences of ordinary people. So whether Hillary is knowledgeable about affairs of state or not, that actually is a matter of opinion. I don't think she is very knowledgeable about affairs of state. I think it's largely a put on. But the common belief these days is that Hillary's inevitable. Hillary's going to be the next president. And what would happen if Hillary were to be elected? Well, the fact is she's a very unpopular candidate with the general population. Polling data indicates by large margins people don't trust her. I've seen polling data indicating that as many as 60% of Americans say they don't trust her. So what does that mean if she should win? If Hillary is elected to the presidency, you can be almost 100% sure that the House of Representatives will remain Republican. And therefore Hillary's agenda, much of it, simply won't happen unless she decides to become a Republican. Hillary simply doesn't have the popularity to have the coattailing effect and capture the House of Representatives. And so her administration would end up being, in some respects, the same that Obama's has been since January of 2011. And since that time, most of the things that Obama has accomplished have been through executive actions, recognizing Cuba, putting millions of acres of new lands under protected status, protecting the environment, and negotiating some deals that apparently have been put into effect over climate change and things like of that nature. But in terms of getting legislation through Congress, virtually nothing has happened since January 2011. And the reason for that was that people responded negatively in a huge way toward the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. The Republican sweep of the House of Representatives in 2010 was largely because of Obamacare, and it was a sea change election, and they've maintained control ever since. So all of the legislative accomplishments, those that mattered very much in the Obama administration, happened during the first 2 years when there was Democratic control of both houses of Congress. Since that time, very little has got through Congress that matters to ordinary people, unless you count these negotiations to stop the default on the national debt and things like that. And that only happened because the consequences would have been so severe and so long-lasting and would have affected people who voted to let the country default in such a bad way that they were able to do deals. And even that did require a few Republicans to come over, but they only came over because the consequences would have been so severe. But bipartisanship has been essentially dead since January 2011. You don't have a lot of issues these days where Republicans and Democrats actually work together. So what you basically have is this log jam, it's gridlock. So it's virtually impossible to get anything through Congress with regard to gun control. And there have been efforts about immigration, whether you agree with that or not. The effort to get an immigration control law, immigration reform law through Congress has failed because one side simply will not do it. And so that's what Hillary is going to face should she be elected. She may be able to do some things with the executive branch and through executive powers as Obama has done, but the chances of getting anything through Congress is virtually non-existent. So what you could count on from Hillary administration is that probably the best that would happen would be that the country just continues to kind of limp along and you have kind of a status quo and problems don't get fixed and the poor keep getting kicked in the shin, or actually worse places than that. The working class continues to get pummeled, the middle class continues to circle around the drain because of gridlock. Because of the fact that you would have a Democratic president, but the Republican-controlled House won't pass anything, and they're going to keep the House because Hillary is just so unpopular with the general electorate. She doesn't generate a lot of enthusiasm. There are people who support her enthusiastically, of course, but there are a lot of other people who don't trust her, and that seems to be the majority of the electorate. So you can count on partisan gridlock should Hillary be elected president. But is that even going to happen? Recent polling data indicates that, in fact, Donald Trump is a viable candidate. Could he win the presidency? Well, in fact, I would not be surprised at all if Trump were to actually win and move into the White House. And why is that? Well, in Europe and some other places other than the United States, pollsters have been very, very wrong about predicting outcomes. Remember the Brexit vote last summer? Everybody believed that Britain was going to vote to stay in the European Union. That's what everybody believed. You know, it couldn't be any other way. It had to be that way. And yet the majority turned out and they voted to leave the European Union. So at least in European nations, in some of those places, pollsters have been getting it wrong. Now, polls have been a lot more accurate in the United States. In the U.S., these assertions that landline telephones are going away and pollsters always use landline telephones and consequently they're bound to be wrong, that hasn't panned out. The polling has been reasonably accurate. But I think it's very possible that by the second week in November, the U.S. could be looking at a Trump presidency. And why is that? Well, there's been a lot of Trump shaming. There have been so many people so mad and so angry about Donald Trump that the chorus from the pundits has been, he's not going to be nominated. Donald Trump will not be the nominee. That can't be that way. You know, there's no way that he can be the nominee. And now people are saying, he can't be president. There's no way this guy is going to be elected in spite of the fact that he's been surging in the polls. And why is that? Well, pundits are telling people you cannot vote for this guy. You must not vote for this guy. And a lot of times people don't like to be told what to do by people that they consider to be elites. Because like I said a little bit earlier, the day-to-day experiences of most people are very different from the day-to-day experiences of people that you see writing columns and appearing on the cable network news show and outlets similar in nature to those. Because those people are pretty well off. They've got good steady jobs with benefits, and as long as they don't screw up the ratings or make the corporate bosses mad, they're going to be around and they're going to live pretty decent lives. But on the other hand, millions of Americans in a variety of unstable occupations actually do struggle. And so there's a difference in the experience that the pundits have and the experiences that people have. A lot of people really don't like this idea of free trade taking away jobs, and they firmly believe that free trade has taken away jobs. And has it? Well, the latest estimates I've seen with regard to NAFTA is that about 1 million jobs, probably more by now, have been sucked south over a 20-year period. And even a lot of the people who support free trade say that it hasn't been particularly good for employment. Then there's this other issue of the violence that's been taking place. Donald Trump does present a pretty dark view of America, and news events seem to support that. Violence does seem to be increasing. 2016 has been a violent year. And what you get from the Democratic side mostly, and I do think we need more gun control. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But the political reality is it's not going to happen anytime soon, because Democrats cannot capture the House and the other party isn't going to support it. So what you have left are other solutions. Then there's this fact, there's a lot of talk about the fact that Hillary is so experienced and this and that and the other. And in fact, the Bill Clinton administration didn't have to deal with any serious crises with regard to national security. Not that anybody knows about, anyway. And in fact, their administration was the one that was in charge during much of the planning for the 9/11 attacks. And they obviously missed that anything was going on. Now, the Bush administration was just completely incompetent in many ways. There's no doubt about that. But the Clinton administration didn't pick up that anything was happening. They weren't prepared. And in fact, a case could be made that they never dealt with any huge national security crisis. And Trump talks really, really tough. And as I said, people don't like to be told what to do. They don't like to open up a printed newspaper and have people telling them, you cannot vote this way, you must not vote this way, and this, that, and the other. And when it comes to prejudice against various groups, there is a lot more of that in the United States than people would like to believe. Americans on the whole are not necessarily as tolerant as a lot of people would like to believe. And in times of crisis, people do often support extreme leaders. And the other extreme leader who was in the race, Bernie Sanders, he didn't make it. And so if people want to look for a maverick or an outsider, the only person left is Trump, because polling data is indicating pretty clearly that there is no shift toward third party or independent candidates. If that was happening, you couldn't hide it. There'd be no way to hide that in the polling data. So my estimation of what will happen in the near future is this. At the present time, and I'm speaking before the debates on September 24th, so this is before the debates, it could go either way. But there are an abundance of reasons, including people voting against what they're telling pollsters, including Trump shaming, including fears about terrorism, and people who want an outsider when Hillary's perceived to be an insider. There are strong reasons to believe that Donald Trump could actually win the presidency. What will happen under his administration, should he be elected, that's hard to say. He's going to face a lot of obstacles within his own party and outside his own party. My guess is that hate activity against various groups, at least government-sanctioned hate activity, would not be as bad as people expect. There will be things that happen on the street and in society at large, but a lot of the things that he does propose would not actually become reality. So here's what I think. At this point, it could go either way, but no one should be surprised if Donald Trump actually does make it to the White House. And no matter what happens, my fear is that the United States is going to face some dark and difficult times ahead. I wish that wasn't true, but I fear that it is. The prospects of what's going to happen range from something approaching the status quo, in other words, things aren't going to get a lot better for most people, to an absolute disaster. It's somewhere between status quo and things getting really bad. So my advice is to do whatever you can to make reasonable preparation for some difficult times ahead. I wish it wasn't that way, but realistically, try and look at the tea leaves. I do feel that there are probably rough times ahead for the United States. So for what it's worth, that's how I see it. Have a good day.